Welcome to the Real News Network. I'm Mark Steiner. Great to have you with us. Towards the end of last year, just when it seemed that the Israeli military was poised to invade and once again begin bombardment of the Gaza Strip, an agreement was reached between the Israeli government and Hamas. While the Israeli siege on Gaza remains in place and the great march of return by Palestinians trapped in the Strip continues like clockwork every Friday, the Israeli government somehow agreed to allow Qatar to send money to the Gaza Strip to pay public workers. That may have alleviated some of the suffering of the people of Gaza to an extent. And after some of the Qatari money committed had been transferred to Gaza, the Israeli government broke that agreement and then froze the rest of the money. Some maintained to ensure they did not appear as they were being soft on Hamas. When the Israeli government finally relented and allowed the rest of the money through, Hamas announced it refused to accept any of the Qatari money. In response, the Qatari government said the money would be invested in humanitarian projects in the Gaza Strip instead. The Qatari ambassador, Mohammed El-Amari, had this to say.
Hamas leadership informed us they refused to accept salaries to be paid under any condition, as a way to spare all the parties any pressure. It was agreed to dedicate the Qatari financial grant to pay for humanitarian projects with full coordination and cooperation with the United Nations, whether the projects are to help poor families or to improve and develop electricity networks or projects that serve the health ministry or in cash-forward projects. There will be a signing of all agreements with the United Nations on Monday to the amount of $20 million.
Now, to help us wade through this political complexity of this issue, we talk with Dr. Imad Al-Soos, a scholar who studies and writes about Hamas and Palestinian nationalism. Dr. Al-Soos is currently a research fellow at the Max Planck Institute for Social Anthropology in Halle in central Germany and joins us from Berlin, where he lives. And Imad, welcome. Good to have you with us.
Thank you so much, Mark, for having me.
Appreciate you taking the time. So let's start here. So after the bloody confrontations where more than 250 Palestinians were killed in Gaza by Israeli forces in March of last year, Hamas and Israel reached some kind of agreement. And what was the substance of this agreement? I mean, the political background to it. And why did Hamas accept it?
I mean, here it's very tricky because still we don't have a written agreement, but we can call it understandings led by the Egyptian mediator between Israel and Hamas. I mean, to summarize this understanding in one phrase, we can say security for ending siege or security for lifting siege. From the part of Hamas supposed to reduce the rhythm of the popular protest in the border between Gaza and Israel, which embarrassed Israel, basically the night protest and the fire kites. From the Israeli side, Israel is supposed to ease the siege, and that include, for example, the food, labor, and the movement of people. Like if we take for an example, in the last October, Israel already reduced fishing zone in Gaza from 9 nautical miles into 6. And this is supposed, according to the Oslo Agreement, to be 20 nautical miles. On the other side, the labor supposed to go to Israel, Palestinian labor into Israel, and this didn't happen. And the movement of people is still highly restricted with between Israel and Gaza and between Egypt and Gaza. So in reality, this is basically was the understandings through the Egyptian mediator between Hamas and Israel.
So why do you think Hamas accepted it, though? Why was this in Hamas's interests and Israel's interest?
Israel's interest is the security. Hamas' interest is lifting or ending the siege on Gaza. So can its popular support regain again, and then the economy can function again. Israel always look at Gaza from security lens, and the popular protest after the spring has a huge influence in the not only on Israel but also in the region. The authoritarian regimes in the region, they don't see popular protests succeed because these popular protests can invite international support. And this is why Israel always, through the Egyptian mediator, threatened to wage a war on Gaza if these popular protests continue on the border of Israel.
So let's talk about some of the internal contradictions here within the Palestinian movements. I mean, there was significant opposition to this agreement from President Mahmoud Abbas, who, of course, is the head of the Palestinian Authority and the Fatah. So he has refused to send money to pay the salaries of workers in Gaza. He tries to undermine the agreement. So why is Abbas so fiercely opposed to this, that he's willing to take on an active role making the lives of the people in Gaza even worse? And why did Qatar jump in and agree to forward the money and pay their salaries? I mean, what's the politics behind that, and how does that play into the overall struggle of Palestinian liberation?
I think this is a very good question. Let's split it into two parts. The first part regarding the Palestinians. I think Fatah and the President Abbas can be understood within the framework of authoritarian tradition within settler colonial power. I mean, if you take the Fatah and President Abbas' argument, they would say that Hamas agreed to hand in the government of Gaza. Therefore, the security should be in our hand and the financial transfers in our hand. And as long as Hamas agreed that to receive the Qatari money through Israel and not through us, this jeopardized the negotiation to unite Gaza and the West Bank. And so it's the end of the reconciliation. However, from the other side, you can say President Abbas and Fatah behaving in a kind of utopian, barbarian sense. Like they are a country, they have borders, they have sovereignty, etc. When in reality, the security, the borders and the movement of people in a full hand of Israel, even in the West Bank. Even the Palestinian president himself, he need a permit to move inside and outside Palestine. Therefore, Hamas doesn't agree to hand in all the power to the Gaza government, and the Gaza parties who allied with Hamas. They reject to hand power to President Abbas because the monopoly over the legitimate use of force does not meet the Palestinian Authority, which is under the occupation. Tell me, please.
So, I mean, in some ways, I mean, when you watch this, to me, this almost epitomizes the difficulties that Palestinians have in a unified political movement to fight for their future, to even look for a two-state solution, any of that. I mean, the larger picture around this shows how difficult it is for this to happen just because of the internal warring inside itself between Palestinians.
Yes, I mean, this is partially true, but at the end, both of them agreed for two-state solutions. Hamas in its latest document, a charter, the new charter, and Fatah since long time ago. But I think it's not in the interest of Israel, the two-state solution nowadays, and it's not in the interest of Israel to unite Gaza and the West Bank. They wanted to keep this split, to weaken the Palestinians and keep them divided so they can continue on with their settler occupation. But I want just to come, if you let me, to the Qatari. Why Qatar jumped in?
Yeah, I was about to ask you that question. So, that was next.
Yeah, this is the second part of the question. I think this is a very interesting question. I'm not a pro-Qatar, but I have to be fair. Qatar didn't jump in. Qatar is helping Gaza even before the Arab Spring and after the Arab Spring, and helped the Palestinian elections, the democratic elections that the PA rejected when Hamas won in 2006. But after the failure of the Arab Spring, of the counter-revolution, now Qatar is part of a regional tension. Like you have Qatar and Turkey from one side, and you have Israel, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and United Arab Emirates from the other side. So supporting Hamas is a kind of can reflect the regional tensions between Arab countries themselves.
So then it begs the question, why did Hamas refuse to take the Qatari money after all this? And I mean, let's just stop there. So what was that about then?
To be honest, I don't think Hamas principally refused to take the Qatar money. But I think it's rejected how Israel handled the understandings and the money itself, which is part of the understandings. And I think Hamas wanted the money to keep Gaza functioning because the government needs money. But I think because Hamas became more vulnerable to the popular support, and I was following Gaza from inside. I was talking to peers, following their Twitter, Facebook, and news. And I think there was a huge popular rejection of this money, of the Qatari money, because it's come through Israel, and Israel decided when to give it and when not to give it. However, there is a reduction of the amount of the popular protest on the border of Gaza. So they think that Israel doesn't meet its obligations, while Hamas does. And this is why Hamas just rejected to calm the popular rejection of this money.
So let me just say one final thing. So I'm very curious about this. How do you think all of this, the battle of the Qatari money, who controls the money, how is this going to play into the larger picture in the struggle between Gazans and Israel, and between Palestinians in the West Bank and Israel? I mean, because this is a one issue in the midst of a very complex struggle that's going on.
I think you touched the core of the conflict. I will not go far from your questions, but I will go deep into it. I think the problem that if you see Gaza is about 75 or 80% refugees. Where they are coming from villages and cities around Gaza, which is now Israel. And it's the most populated area in the world. And always is going to be a security problem if the occupation issue and the refugees issues is not addressed. And I think this is the core of the problem. Not Hamas can go and come the PA, but if the question is not solved, the conflict will be more complex and will continue more and more.
Well, Imad Al-Soos, this has been really enlightening and eye-opening. I appreciate the time you've taken with us here at The Real News. Thank you so much for all your work and for joining us here today.
Thank you so much, Mark. I liked all of your questions.
Thank you. And I am Mark Steiner here for The Real News Network. Thank you all so much for watching and being with us. Take care.